I have a confession to make. As much as I'd like to not say this, but I've always been worried and concerned about what people would think of me. And I often had to make decisions in life which I really didn't want to make. And when I made them and I walked my own path, the loneliness would really get to me. The self-doubts and the mind would be like the sitting in your loneliness would feel like a friend, even though you didn't want it to be your friend. And I'm now at that phase again where I have to take a leap of faith. And I've struggled for a very long time with this word faith. And somehow or the other, as life has it, a beautiful person walks into my life, sits down with me, and I'm in awe with her story. It's all about a leap of faith. She embodies it, she walks it, and she expresses her courage in her way of thinking, being, and doing. For me, I felt like I was sitting down with the very person I needed to talk to look inside of my soul and say, can you, one more time, take a leap of faith? I really hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really left a place in my heart and really touched my soul. And I hope it inspires you and encourages you also to take your leap of faith. Enjoy this week's episode. What is your definition of being yourself in courage?
Of being myself in courage.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's having the ability to remember that you're here to do something, and that strong belief driving your day-to-day actions when you wake up. You're here to do something. It doesn't matter if it feels like the odds are stacked up against you. You just need to put one foot in front of the other, wear that mask of, I've got this. And you see that like a domino effect, the things around you start clearing, the woods open up, and then you walk yourself to the other way. So for me, that's courage, knowing that you don't necessarily have, and this is my life, I don't have everything sorted out. I'm not a very pre-planned person, as you can see from today. But I know, and I said a prayer this morning to say, I really want to be able to, whatever you want me to say, help me get the message across. And I know that the message will come across. So irrespective of the hurdles that I faced during the day, I knew that this would happen. And I knew that we would start chatting and then it would flow. And for me, that's courage. Just having the trust to put one foot in front of the other and know that everything else will sort itself out and you will deal with what comes your way.
But you weren't always like this, were you?
No. And I think that's partly probably like the sort of Asian upbringing, right? Like, so women aren't really encouraged to be brave. And I don't think that's just an Asian thing, but in general, if you're from a specific ethnic minority and maybe even the West, I don't know. I don't have a lot of people who I know the entire journeys of, so maybe I'm generalizing a little bit over here. But we are taught that, somebody else has got you, like your dad's got you, and you just need to follow in specific footprints, and you're not meant to forge your own path. Just telling someone today that one of the things my dad said, and he said it in a very loving way, and I understand why he said that, and he was just like, Pavi, we shouldn't all aim to be, phenomenal or outstanding. Always aim to be above average. But like if you're on one end of the spectrum, life is going to get very hard for you. And I think that's what everyone strives to be as a girl. It's just, there's a certain path. Everyone's walked it ahead of you and you try to tread it your own way. You could make tweaks here and there, but the path's set out for you. So it's only when you have to do something slightly different that then you need to start having the real balls, if you say, to be able to navigate that path.
So then you're not just going to that threshold, you're going past that threshold because that threshold no longer exists if you're going into that uncharted path, right?
Yes, exactly. It's, and you're absolutely right. Like there is no safe space anymore. The only safe space you have is you internally. And I think that's a realization that I have to keep bringing myself back to know that there's only one person in this universe who's got you, and that's yourself. The less you expect from your family, your friends, whatever it is, the happier you're going to be, and then also there's so much of strength within not just women, anyone, right? Like, this is why we've been put on this earth. We've been put on this earth for a specific path. And even if you are left to your own devices, and this is something that most parents, just leave your kids be. Try not to interfere with them too much, because actually they've been created perfect. And if they're left to their own devices, I mean, obviously not the dangerous bits of like leaving them in front of a lion and expecting them to fend for themselves, but they naturally evolve and learn things in their own sort of beautiful way, without needing that sort of external push all the time. And this applies for adults as well, I think.
There are a couple of things in that would love to unpack, but I first want everyone who's listening out there to know your background a little bit more. Because when I speak about courage, everyone's like, well, what makes her courage? Why ask her about courage? So could you share your story of courage to everyone?
Yes, sure. So I'm from a very traditional Indian upbringing from the south of India. Even if you go to the south of India today, it's still fairly laid back, and there's still a little bit of the old Indian there. And born to parents who left India a long time ago, and they sort of almost frozen in time in terms of their values were the values that they carried across when they went to the Middle East to start working in their early 30s or whatever. And so when I was in my 20s, I fell in love with my college best friend. He was unfortunately, or maybe for myself, fortunately, unfortunately for my family, from a different religion, a different part of India. And I insisted I wanted to marry him, right? So this was a first in my family, my extended family. And, I got the usual warnings of like, love marriages don't work, and marriage is all about compatibility. And like, when you come from different backgrounds, these things are going to really, really affect your marriage, et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't want that to be my narrative. Even though I was the talk of the town, I wanted to be that person who did this and it worked. And everybody else was able to then free themselves from the shackles of, you must marry a Mallu, Christian, Marthomite. It's such a small pool of people that you can really pick from. But unfortunately, my marriage didn't work out. And it didn't work out because he was a Hindu or a Brahmin or a Tamilian. It worked out because, when we grew up and we were in our 30s, we started talking about the big life things and the next steps. We realized we wanted completely different things.
And did you discover it after marriage?
Yes, because the stuff that we wanted, like some of the, like, for example, we never talked about it because in my mind, with my traditional upbringing, what one does after one gets married is like, okay, you buy a house and you, especially I'm from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. So the dream is go abroad, work abroad, make lots of money, have children, build your big house and with a white picket fence or whatever it is. But my ex-partner, who was very non-traditional, and he was just like, no, actually, I don't want all of those things. And I want to move back to India, and I want to have a small life. And actually, I don't like kids, and I don't want, no offense, but I don't want one of my own. And for me, and these discussions happened over time as we sort of settled into a marriage. And at some point, I realized, I really, really, really don't want this for myself. And I tried to adjust to that, but I realized I wouldn't be living my life authentically. I would always be sort of settling, and I would hold it against him in so many ways that I wasn't able to fulfill what I thought was a key part of my purpose. So those are the reasons it didn't work out. But then I didn't want be that person who like, look at Pavi, she did this and look where she ended up. And, I didn't want to be the example that parents then use to say, this is why you should never go against the grain because you end up in, as Pavi did or whatever. And, for people who've come from India, they will know this, but for a woman, once she's divorced, that's it, right? Like, the market doesn't appreciate second hands, as they call it.
I understand that narrative. I wasn't divorced, but my sister was. And it was just the most unjoyful thing to ever see someone go through. It's actually quite heartbreaking for a woman, to be honest.
Yeah. And then you're asked to settle, right? Like the things that you're sort of was sent your way and just like, well, why do you think this is appropriate? Like for me? And they're like, oh, but you don't have a lot of prospects because you're divorced, and if you want to have a child, this is what you need to do. So this is when I like one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and I keep telling people is to own your narrative, right? Like just don't allow other people to define your experience for you. So what is it that I wanted to do? I wanted to have a child as much, if not more, than I wanted to have a loving and nurturing partner. And these aren't like zero-sum game. But I realized for me, the sequence for that didn't matter. Society told us that you must have one to have another. But in my mind, I was like, wait, why can I not have number two before number one, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is when I told myself, when I turn 38, if I haven't found the Mr. Kind, amazing, progressive combination, because I'm not going to settle, I will then progress on this journey on my own, because then I know I'm dealing with, the fertility window and all of that. So I was just like, I'll give myself to 38. I will honor my parents' requests of trying to do it the traditional way till then. And I did genuinely try. Like I would engage with people that they send my way. I would, I did, look for the man or whatever it is. And when it didn't come, I didn't think that it was the end of the world. So on my 30th birthday, I gifted myself a trip to an IVF clinic to have a kickoff treatment for essentially one cycle of a fertility treatment. And then I told myself that I knew that I really, really felt it in my bones that I was going to be a mom. But I was open to how this was going to happen. So I was like, the universe will make this happen, if not by... And this is why I just went for one round of IVF.
Just one?
One. I just bought my... Because they actually give you options. They're like, this is a bit of an industry. It's like, you give a 30% discount if you go for a package of 5 attempts. And, the sperm becomes cheaper if you buy multiple vials and all of that, because people tend to do it multiple rounds. But I said to myself, if this is meant for me, if a child of my own genes is meant for me, this will happen in the first round. And if it doesn't, I know that it will happen some other way. And I had signed up to an adoption process. So I left myself open to the process, but I was very committed on the outcome. So,
Pavi, there's so much I want to ask you. I want to ask you about that courage, but also there's something you said that has stuck to me throughout everything you're saying right now is the constant choice between traditions and choosing your way. And you kept using the word progress. That, and then I'm combining it in my head with the word safe. Because you said, what is safe? And I've always argued with people when they say the word safe. I'm like, safe for whom? What does that really mean and for what? So I always think, well, what about a courageous space? And when I think about you and you say you made safe space within you and you came to that courageous space, it seemed to me there was always a constant reconciliation. Traditional me. How did you navigate that process in between the two? Because I think that's quite a bit.
I think I have to attribute this to my dad, right? So I've lived my life trying to be the perfect daughter. to my dad. At some point, I realized that if I had to make him happy, I would have to almost give myself up completely. And it was this constant challenge at whatever I did and the feedback loop at whatever I did when I realized, like, I'm never going to make him happy. I honestly, even if I spent 150% of my effort trying to make him happy, I will never be able to make him happy. And while that sounds quite depressing on the face of it,
I understand.
It was actually, the best thing that he could have done for me. And I know this I do a lot of energy work. And souls come in, and there are soul families. Souls travel as a pack. And the whole concept is that souls travel as a pack, and they make contracts with each other before they sort of manifest to say, I'm going to give you this experience, and I'm going to do this particular thing to you, so your soul has the opportunity to make a choice, or and free will is a gift that we've been given. So you don't have to. There's no predestined way that you have to do it. You have the choice, and this is your soul's like progression journey. And in doing some of this energy work, and it was like this constant thing of why can I not, in all of the work that I do, why can I not make my dad happy? But there was also a constant this thing. When I did that work, I realized my dad has been the single stable factor in my life. I lost my mom when I was 8 years old.
Oh, okay.
And despite all of our challenges, I know today, and he knows today, that if there's one person who will kind of go, I will do anything for this person, no matter what happens, it's us for each other, right? Irrespective of me being the black sheep of the family, irrespective of him being the challenging father. And this is his role in my life, I've spent generations and lifetimes of pandering to the social norm, of sacrificing myself for the social norm. And for me, my purpose in this life is to own my soul and to say, I need to fill my cup, and my cup will be filled. And the only way that I could have done that is to have my father, given the strong connection we have with each other, give me the combination of, I will always be there, but I'm going to be a pain in the ass and challenge every one of your decisions and expect you to align to every one of mine until you get to a point where you have this courage and determination to stand up for anything, even me. And that's how I got to where I was. Because had it been, a very like chilled out, easygoing parent, perhaps I may have felt guilty at, doing this if this is the one thing that they said not to do. But given this was one of the million things that I was asked not to do, I had to constantly battle this, do it the right way or do it the Pavi way, all through my life. And with
childhood.
Sorry?
From childhood.
From childhood, right? Like, and with every time I got a little bit more and more stronger. And some of these decisions were all, there was a make and break. So I could have easily been excluded from the family, or, said, in India, people do a lot like, we're never speaking to her again. She is no longer my child. They do a lot of those very dramatic statements. But heart of hearts, I knew that he would never say that.
Did there ever come a time where you pushed him a bit over that limit and he just said, not having it, not talking to you?
Yeah, my dad hasn't talked to me on multiple occasions throughout my life.
Right. Okay.
But
how did you find did you make the amends? Did he come? How did that work?
So the first time was when I said I wanted to get married to my then husband. And I don't think I spoke to him for a year and a half. I don't remember the exact timeline. And the way it was amended, I just turned up. I just flew to Ajman. I sat outside. They weren't even at home. I just sat outside in my suitcase and I just waited for them to turn up. And then when they did, they were just like, my dad was just like, oh. And he just opened the door and he's like, get in. So I think it's because he also knows that I am a constant for him. And I think it just shows that sort of the dynamic of, we heart of heart know that we are unconditional in each other's lives. It may not seem like that on the surface, but there is a connection that I have with my dad's soul. And no matter what happens, we may never speak to each other. But if you ask my dad, who will mourn him the most when he passes away, who will miss him the most when he passes away, he will tell me. He will tell anyone like in a second. And he even asked my mother, and apparently they had a fight about this, because he's like, who do you think will be the saddest when I die? And she's like, Pavi. Like, what? Not you? So it's just known.
My mom used to get upset when she's like, you're always his favorite. And I was like, I did not mean that to be that way. And I'd be like, because I have 3 sisters, I'm like, he loves them all the same. And she's like, no. Even my sisters would tell me, but I get the unconditional love, because I have walked out once or twice as well and said, no, I'm not having this. And he's always been the glue. So I understand that perspective of that unconditional love in there. But for a lot of Asians, I would say quantified as Asians, the idea of going against your traditions still plays a lot of, in some ways, almost traumatizing, or like it's a very fearful, courageous step, actually, to some degree. So does it have to be a calling inside, do you feel? Or do you feel what drove you to just say, okay, now enough, I'm doing this? Is it something inside?
I think it definitely has to come from within. If you don't feel it, and if you're not 100% committed to it, then it's not important enough for you. You have to choose your battles. You can't fight for everything, right? Like, it has to be the stuff that this is a part of my ethos. Like, if I don't do this, I'm just not being myself. Like, I wouldn't throw my toys out of the pram for everything. It's just the things which I think are, just a part of who you are. And it angers me to think that I have to be anything else but that. That's when I know, like, this bit I cannot let go of. And look, like, when people ask me about this, one of the things I say is, what is progress?
What is progress? Tell me.
Exactly, right? Like, how did evolution happen? Evolution happened, or progress happened, when the black sheep left the flock and did something else, right? Like, there's safety in numbers. And I guess you could think of from an evolution, people hung out together because there's safety in numbers. The wolves couldn't get you if you were a pack and all of that. But equally, if you stuck to the same pastures, you might never have found new pastures. And, we'd still be walking around in our Neanderthal clothes or whatever it is. It's the
Absolutely.
people. Yeah. So it's always the people who sort of stray and try something different. They always get killed for it. Even Jesus Christ was crucified when he...
Well, now we're bringing Jesus into the conversation.
Right? Like, when he was doing it, he got crucified.
Yeah.
Like, how many other years later we now recognize it, right? And people have progressed. So every journey of progress is marked by one poor soul taking that step forward in courageous integrity, and then more and more people joining them till it becomes a movement.
Okay, but then, when you leave those pastures, because I get that pastures, you leave it, there is this unbelievable amount of loneliness that people don't realize that happens. Everybody always reveres you when you get to the position you're at, or when you've accomplished it. And everybody wants to be there at the party, raving with you. But to get there, that journey of in between, to me at least, I don't know if you've experienced it, but the sense of loneliness is massive and under almost dismissed, I find sometimes. I don't know if you've had that.
It's absolutely 150% extremely like daunting. It's very lonely, but it's your gift.
How did you tell yourself that? How did you ever tell yourself that every time you were in that?
I think it was maybe the resilience that I've had. Like that period of my life made me reflect. Until then, I was a poster child from great grades, went to the best universities, always did what my parents asked of me, kept my head down, etc., etc. But every time you fall, you realize you pick yourself up. And it's really shit in the beginning, but somehow you always get over it. And I think for me, maybe because I lost a mother at a very young age. So on the list of like the top 5 things which are called psychological trauma in a human being's life, it's loss of a parent, loss of a father, loss of a child, right? I think the loss of a child comes first. But then in my life, I have dealt with all of them.
All the top 5 of what I just said.
Well, the top 3 at least.
Okay.
And it was one of those things when, if for an 8-year-old to lose a mother, this is not an experience that I want for anyone. Forget 8-year-old. For any child to lose a mother, it's what keeps me up at night these days, right? Like as a single parent,
imagine
like,
as a single parent.
But I survived. I got to my 20s. There were moments of joy. There were moments of sorrow. I had a stepmother who I was very skeptical about, but then she was a lovely woman. And it was like those sorts of things which make you realize that these things happen to you, but like there is a certain sense of resilience, and it'll be so, so bad in the beginning, but then there is always a joy or a jewel that comes out of it. For me, my dad's remarriage, which was quite traumatic for me, actually, the jewel that came out of it was my sister. My mother had a daughter from her previous marriage. And my sister was like, if there was Mary had a little lamb, she was my lamb.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I used to ask myself as a child, I was like, oh, I wish all of this would go away. And then I think, but then I wouldn't have Asha. So then even as a kid, I was asking myself these questions and then balancing it out to say, oh, but, what was taken with one hand, I have received something in the other.
Yeah.
So I think that inherent knowledge that the woods are dark, lonely, and deep, but there's always light at that end of the tunnel. It's just about constantly telling yourself this to get through that tunnel, and also asking yourself, what is the jewel that I'm going to get from this experience? And for me, that loneliness was for me a mirror to realize, like, one of the reasons I stayed in my marriage, or I considered staying in my marriage, was because I didn't want to be alone.
Oh, that's a big one. I did actually have that written down in one of my questions. Choosing your path that you've chosen, high career, child, your own voice, and you speaking up about your, the conflicts of tradition, all of that. I try to imagine what was always been my biggest fear in all of this. And it's always been like, I'm going to end up alone. Why I always say, why am I doing this? I'm going to end up alone. So how did you go through that?
So I have to give all my credit to my ex-husband for this.
Okay.
Because, there's a separate podcast about this, and you can say he's super progressive, and he really helped me through this transition as well. But for him, his fundamentals are, Pavi, you've got to learn to love yourself first, and you've got to learn to love your own company. Because even when we were together, I would yearn for company. I was a consultant, so I was constantly traveling, and I would cry every Monday, and I was like, oh, I'm going to miss you. And he's just like, why? You're going to work, and you miss her. And he's like, oh, but I want to be with you. And when I come back, he was completely happy. He didn't look like he had missed me one bit. And I would fight. And I was like, you didn't miss me? He's like, I missed you. It's like, but why do you look so happy? He's like, because I like being with myself, like I like my own company. And he saw nothing wrong with it. And I just thought, like, oh, you're so unromantic. But now with the wisdom and catching up to maybe his wisdom, like, I think the fundamental reason for why most people stay in unhappy relationships is their fear of being alone. right? Or even making the wrong choices is because, I don't want to be isolated from the pack. I don't want my family to let go of me. But in that dark tunnel that I was going through, I told myself, if there's one thing I have to master during this is to learn to be with myself. I forced myself into like that. I will spend time with myself. So I forced myself to go on a holiday on my own. Oh my gosh, like the first day I spent in the bathroom of the hotel in the bathtub crying. Right? I did not want to do this. The second day I sort of ventured out, had lunch with a book, drinking wine, looking at people, feeling like an absolute loser. The
Did
third
you?
day, yes, because I was just like, who goes on holidays on their own? Yes, exactly. Like there's so many people who do this. The third day, I struck up a conversation with people. I enjoyed myself, and I forced myself to do things. I went on a hike, which I would never do on my own. I just forced myself to do the things that I always thought I couldn't do on my own. And all of these times where you go on holidays, you go on hikes, there's so much of time for introspection and you only get to spend it with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I started learning to be comfortable in my own skin. And I got to a point where I am today to say, it'd be amazing to have a loving partner. I'd love to, share my life and experience. And I'm not going to pretend that there aren't times when, I experience an amazing thing and I think, I wish there was someone to share this with me.
Yeah.
And James too small to understand what I just experienced. Or when he does something really cute and I go, oh, and then I just say, oh, but no one saw that, but I'm happy. I'm okay to be alone. And I think that was the jewel of that tunnel for me. The ability to come out of it and say, actually, Pavithra Sundar Prakash, you're pretty kick-ass on your own. And even if you're going to hang out with yourself for the rest of your life, yeah, it's going to be a little bit lonely, but you'll be okay. And the minute I came to that realization, Kirti, that was it. It was like a veil had lifted and people were attracted to me immediately. I found my tribe. There are people that I interact with, the people, my support network, all of that. They all slotted back into place. Weirdly enough, during my divorce, I just felt that even my family wasn't there. We still have.
Oh, they weren't?
We still have these discussions and, it's an unresolved issue, but I feel like, no, you weren't there. Where were you? You weren't calling me every day. And, my brother and my sister-in-law, they were in London, but I didn't see them as often. But it was just literally the universe, no, you got to get through this. And again, just like my dad was pressing on the wound until I was just I was able to do this. I think I was blessed with no distractions for you, my friend. You are going to be alone, no romantic interests, nothing. Just deal with this period until you get out of it going, I'm okay. And then things sort of unfolded from there on.
It made me wonder about the next step also. So when you decided, okay, I'm going to be a single mom, right? That also then comes to that next layer of who's going to take care of me, right? Or am I, because everybody goes, I know when, they say, well, if you have your own child and who's going to take care of you when, all those, I call them those typical questions you get from an Asian community, like all the things that come from a space of love, but actually feels so fear-based.
Yeah.
Who's going to do this if that? And who's going to do this if that? And that's a different kind of loneliness as well, if that makes sense.
This is true. I mean, one of the things, Kirti, before I decided to do this adventure with Jaden, as I'll call it, it was COVID, right? So, and again, you could look at it and I think it's all a matter of perspective, how you take it. So some people were like, oh my God, I had a COVID baby. And I was just thinking, oh gosh, it's my 30th birthday. We're right in the middle of it. This doesn't seem, the next 2 years are going to be, and the first year and a half of Jaden's life was under COVID, right? Including my pregnancy. But for me, I looked at it and I was just like, this is an extremely isolating situation as it is. However, what's the jewel? What is it like I'm getting out of this? And the choice I was faced with, which I really had to think about before I did it, was if you want to go ahead with it, only do it if you are going to commit to doing it, if all on your own. The world has just shown you that overnight, people could disappear, i.e. you could be under lockdown, you can't see your family. So if you're going to do it relying on support from friends, family, network, etc., don't do it, because it's going to be a very, very stressful journey for you. But if you think you can manage it on your own with zero expectations of other people, then do it. And that's when I mentally sort of aligned myself to, no, I'm going to do it. I will do this even if I'm alone. This is when I go into these situations, and even now, I still have people looking at me and go, oh, poor thing. Because they'll be like, there'll be parents, oh, she's doing all of this on her own. And one of the parents from Jaden's nursery looking really stressed over the week. And I was just like, is everything okay? And she's like, oh, I'm a single parent. And like I'm a single parent for a week. My husband's traveling and it's so difficult. And I was just thinking, I was just like, yeah, and I could take that approach. There's nothing wrong with the approach because it is a lot of effort. It is never being able to switch off. But if I'm going to start thinking of it like that, it's going to be even more depressing for me. So with everything, I try to turn around the thought and look for what's the jewel that's hidden. So for me, it was like, do I want the narrative of Jaden's upbringing to be, my mother really struggled to bring me up. There was a void in her life which a man could have filled. Or did I want the narrative to be, my mom, she was a superwoman. She was like chief cuddler, chief comforter and feeder, like all the other moms. But then she also went and kicked ass at work, and she also played sport with me, and she also wrestled with me, and she also took me to school, and she was a dad as well. And for me, I was like, I want that narrative. And to have that narrative, I have to, in my head, be that. And that's when, so for me, a lot of these things are addressed by spending that time reframing it in your mind, and think of the two options. So if you think about divorce, that's unhappy. But staying in an unhappy marriage, that's also unhappy. So you choose your unhappy. Which one is the lesser of the two evils? And the same thing, single parent, a lot of hard work. Not having Jaden, hole in my life. So which is the one that you want to choose?
I met your son, and he's very, very lovely. And when I looked at him, I wondered for a moment, what is his journey with you? Have you ever stood back and wondered that? What's his purpose in life with you?
I can say this because I've seen him as a baby, but Jaden has come into, he's chosen me as his mother because I will give him the space to do what he's here to do. And maybe we can look back at this in 70 years or whatever it is. He's a really, really wise, mature soul.
He's a much older soul than you are.
Oh, absolutely. And I felt that from the first 6 months of his life. Even now, the way he sometimes talks to me about certain things, there is wisdom in the things that he says. And there's a gentleness that he says it with, that I know that my purpose here is to clear the path for him. So Jaden will not experience the traditional hurdles that children have to, battle, like I have, in terms of, your parents are because he's done all of that. Yeah. In his previous lives, he's mastered that. He's come here to do something really, really different. And that's why he's chosen me. It was funny because I asked myself this question when I was pregnant with him, because I always look at children. I love children. Like, if you know me, I'm the woman in the adult party who's in the kids' room playing with the kids, right? And yeah, such a source of joy. And I always think that, this is how God designed us to be. And then we then do something to them, and then they become adults full of their like insecurities, belief systems, etc. And I always feel like children are here to teach parents, not the other way around.
Yeah, I have that philosophy as well.
So then I was asking myself, like, okay, so if I was here to teach my dad to love unconditionally despite not getting what he wanted, I was like, what is Jaden here to teach me? Like, I'm okay with whatever decisions he has to take, and I'm okay with him being gay, and I'm okay with him being, I was like, dear God, can you like show me, like what my blind spots are so that I can start preparing, and so that he doesn't have to go through that journey with me. And it was interesting because this is diverting a little bit, but like I asked, please show me what I'm ignorant to, so that I can start working on that, and I can start like expanding my horizons so that this doesn't have to be a lesson. And then I met in a space of 2 to 3 weeks, 2 trans individuals. When I went, I know nothing about this. So I was just like, I have had no experience with this. And literally I was just like, right, this is my call from the universe to say, this is your blind spot. You think you're okay with everything, but actually you know nothing about this journey. So maybe you need to educate yourself on this. And this is when I asked, like, is it okay if I ask questions? And I was like getting myself comfortable just in case that's, I'm not saying that's Jaden's journey. I was like, but that was definitely something I thought, I don't know that. And maybe, that might be something I have to deal with. Who knows? And
that I am going to onboard. I like that. I really like that. It's nice to go in with that set of, I don't know what my blind spot is. Show me so that I can master it in a certain way, And even if you do, like, I know I have some blind spots. I'm aware of them, and I'm just like, how do I unravel it in the quickest way possible? It's funny because I spoke to your sister-in-law and we spoke about shortcuts. And this is what you're reflecting also in a way. It's your way of dealing with uncertainty, unpredictability in a controlling way by asking, show me the way. And so that I'm kind of prepared. So open my eyes to it, which is a whole different narrative than trying to control it with some sense of forcefulness. You're saying do it with a sense of curiosity and then have the courage to go through it. That's how I see it.
No, yeah, you're spot on. I think if you think about like the problems in your life, right? Like, and sometimes people think, why is the same thing happening to me again and again? Well, because you haven't dealt with it. And the minute you deal with it 2 or 3 times and you've completely resolved the issue, you will never have that problem again.
Yeah.
Right. So this is why when these things, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, there's still some things in my life that happen again and again. I'm like, I know, but like
I had this, believe it or not, I just threw a massive tantrum before getting on this podcast. And one day I will tell you when I see you, I'll tell you about this one. But I had a massive tantrum about why does the same thing happen to me? And I was like, am I a dumb to not get this? Because I was just pure frustration. Like, I've done everything. Why not? And now you're telling me, I'm like, wow, isn't this an amazing thing that it's just sliding into the conversation?
Absolutely. And sometimes you're doing it. But the beauty of it is that you're in the cause, right? It's reframing it in your mind, because a lot of people go through their lives feeling like a victim.
Yeah, right? When I become like that, I'm like, why? No need. Yeah.
it's so disempowering, and you feel helpless. You feel like, oh, but like, again, you could change it and you'll be like, yeah, I definitely did that. Right. And then it becomes funny because it's like, yeah, well, I did it because, and I got something out of it. Right. Like, even if it's like a wrong relationship or whatever it is, you put up with it for however long you did because it served you in some way. It served your narrative. So, yeah.
It's just when you think you have it over and then it shows up, you go, I thought I dealt with you. You know how you were saying earlier, like, why are you here again?
Yeah.
That's the part where I'm just like, I didn't sign up to want to be a victim again about this, And I find myself talking, and I was like, if anybody heard me, I think I'd be the best comedy show ever. I don't know if you've ever had that. When you talk
about it. I don't talk to myself out loud, but definitely in my head. I'm like, you idiot. And here we are. So, yeah.
Let me ask you something. So when you're in all these shapes and all these colors and transitions, and they're like really moment to moments, like you say, how do you know which decision to make? What are your determinants to say, this is the decision I'm going to take? What mindset do you have?
One of the things that my energy teacher, Sharma, taught me was to never make a decision out of fear. And to always make a decision out of love or a higher frequency thought of love, being in power, the wider world, good, or whatever it is. So even sometimes there are decisions that and it might be something as simple as work where there's a conflict and I feel uncomfortable with the conflict or whatever it is. I always ask myself, like, which of these is a fear-based decision versus which of these are a love-based decision. And I always choose the love-based one, even though the fear-based one might feed my ego. Yeah. Where like, I need to punish this person or whatever it is because they did the wrong thing or whatever it is. I choose the other because I know that in the longer run, making decisions out of fear will never serve you or anybody else around you. And the other thing I tell people is like, don't think too much about it. Like, don't stress. Like, life is like one of the best things that my ex-husband used to say is like, life is here to for you to play. Like, this is like, you've come here to enjoy life and to play with things. And you try a decision here, it doesn't work out, that's fine. And you move on to the next one. So what's the worst that could happen here, right? Like, and I think that sort of mindset I have adopted to say, because we hold so much weight to each of our decisions sometimes, and it's not that important. You may and will make mistakes, and if you do, that's okay. And you go, oh, okay, wrong turn. I'm just gonna start again, and I know which turn not to take. And sometimes, like we both just discussed, we take that turn because we know there's an ice cream shop at the end of that road. So I
think it's refreshing to hear this one again. I like when you said, there's fear-based, there's love-based. But what if there are moments, and I've seen this with women who have burnt out from across the spectrum, very much into leadership as well, running their own family. And I call it literally running their own family as well. There's always a narrative like, I am busy, busy, busy. But yet they cannot discern between fear-based and love-based. Does that make sense?
So are you saying, how do you create the headspace?
How do you, even in the most overwhelming overthought, because when you burn out, you're overwhelmed and you're overthinking. There's just so much that you just go, the body just exhausts. And then they have to make a decision. But because of that exhaustion, they can neither feel this side nor that side. So what would you suggest along to to it's almost like feed energy back into the mind first for them to be able to see the two.
So I have a grounding practice that I do, like a visualization, where you almost visualize yourself being, sending your roots into Mother Earth, and she's holding you, right? She like at any given point of time, she's your mother and she's holding you. And once you feel held and supported, then visualizing, energy traveling up and connecting to the source and to light, and allow like light to just flow over you and fill you and have this bubble of light around you. And for me, no matter how overwhelmed I get, I do that practice. And then I'm like, right, at this point, I might be tired, but my energy is full of love. The aura around me is light-based. And then I can make a decision. And it takes 2 seconds. Like literally, the more you do it, like initially, because it's hard to visualize and it's practice, it's like a muscle that you have to. But like the more you sort of think about this, and you will feel the difference. So for me, like always taking a beat, and it could be when I go to the loo, in the office, when I go to the loo, doing that practice, it just helps reset me. And then the other bit is also I've learned that, and other people could be different. For me, I don't function well when I'm tired. And I don't function well when I'm trying to do everything all at the same time. So I've chosen my battles. I know that at this given point of time, I'm a director at a global bank. And if I wanted to, I could be here for 14 to 16 hours a day and trying to be seen at all of these different places. But I'm just like, I spent all of my energy trying to bring this child into this world. And I didn't do that so that I would be an absent mother trying to make more money or get like fast in my career. So I told myself that I am going to be the best version of Director Pavi between 9 and 6:30 every day. And when I am here, I am like 150% here. I'm not on Instagram, on TikTok and going, I am like literally 100% here. And then when I leave, I switch off. And even with Jaden, I make choices, because if I wanted to clean my house, keep it like everything really tidy, take him to 100 different classes, all the things that we as parents pressurize ourselves to do because everybody else is doing that. I was just like, what do I want for him? What's the experience I want for him? I want him to feel loved. I want him to have experiences. And I want to be a part of that experience. For me, that's really important, being a part of his experience. So when I'm at home, I am all about Jaden, and I don't waste my time trying to maintain the perfect household. If you can afford it, outsource it. If you can't afford it, just learn to live with lower standards for yourself. But it just frees up, I think, women to put so much pressure on themselves.
I was going to say,
to be the perfect wife. And then we're judged as well. I know, people have come to my house and they're, so many toys all over the place. I'm like, sign of a happy household. So you have to release some of that pressure on yourself first, so that you don't get to that degree of overwhelm. Like, you can't be feeding people or pouring them tea when you don't have anything in your container to pour. So I keep telling myself, I need to fill my own cup first before I even attempt to serve others. Because I know that when I'm rested and I am content, I will be able to be a better mother. I bring light and love to the bank that I work for, and the people around me. But if I'm going to be hardwired, stressed, burnt out, that's not a pleasant part for anyone.
You actually really surprised me. You're the first woman in career as a director that says, when I'm home, I'm 100% with Jaden. You're not 50% with work, bringing it home with you. It sounds like I'm 100% with my son. How do you navigate that? I mean, that's a lot of women I speak think it's not possible. Not possible to not have work from that level, not to have that level and not take it home with you.
It's a difficult, so I see the game that corporates play, right? If you think about it, like everyone over the course of their life, I think of it as a bank. I have invested hours and hours and hours of my personal time into the bank of the corporate, into the bank of the employer. And this, for me, is my time to take it back out. I have not been paid for the number of times I've come back home at 3 a.m. to make sure that something was ready for some MD sitting somewhere for an inconsequential decision at the end of the day, right? Like, let's be honest, nobody's going to die. And I think, again, just taking it lightly to say, I'm really good at my job. I take it seriously, but it's not enough. I don't take it so seriously where I compromise on my reason for existence for it.
Yeah.
We work to be able to live, but most people are living to work. And I don't understand, it's not that I don't understand. I do understand. I've been there, but I think I've grown out of that need to say the only way I can deliver value is by putting in the hours. When I know that when I'm burnt out, I can't think as creatively, I'm not as good as problem solving. The things that people know me for, like when I walk into a problem, it gets solved not because I solve the problem, but there's something around me that gets people to work together. And I'm the glue that holds teams together. And I do that because I bring energy and happiness to a situation. I wouldn't be
also a lot of non-attachment, because you are more of everybody's going to be on this journey, and if I'm a cup that's happy, I can then give it out. But it's not necessarily like you're controlling it, but as much as you're navigating that energy in the room, I would say. Or have I got that off?
No, exactly. What's that? Do you know is it ikigai? I think the Japanese word of whatever you do, have a personal stamp on it, but then know when to stop. So it's not about the quantity of things that you do. It's about whatever you do, doing it with quality. Or you could think about it as the 80-20. What's that 20% that will give you 80% of the outcomes? Not everything that we do on a day-to-day basis is important. Not everything that we do at home is important. So I've been through a coaching journey where I worked on my own sort of development, and I use these toolkits for my own personal life in terms of what's your top 20%.
Yeah.
And I ruthlessly prioritize. And where those things fall out, I also have the courage to say, I'm leaving at 6:30 to pick up my son, and I feel no guilt.
Yeah,
literally, and it's taken a while to feel no guilt, because initially I was like, oh, but everybody else is staying, and I realized this guilt is not serving me. Again, I'm making a decision out of fear. I just come to work, and I know that the days that I'm not there, people miss me. But equally, when I'm not there, I know that the bank is not going to collapse and die. And that's the space I want to operate in. Whenever I'm asked my objectives, I was like, I want to add value to every situation where it will be things move so much faster when I'm around, but I don't want to be indispensable because I want to be able to have a life.
Somebody who's listening out there, and they want that kind of courage. They want to embody it. What are the top 3 things you would tell them? Do this, and this is your best starting point.
The first thing I would say is blind faith. Blind faith that the universe has got your back. You are protected. You can't see it now. You will see it later. So take the plunge, put that first foot, and it might feel really uncomfortable. It's like you're skating on ice where those initial, every time you get on the skating rink, the first 10 minutes is really awkward. And then you start the glide, right? So just take that first step, feel the fear and do it anyway. I think that's a catchphrase, right?
Yeah.
The second one would be to channel. There have been so many people who have taken these steps before you, and you might not know who that person is, but I'm a huge believer in energy work. I'm a huge believer that like we have, we stand on the shoulder of giants. So call on your giant and just say, I'm going through, and I did before this podcast, I asked my mom to be in the room with me. I love this goddess called Durga. I'm a practicing Christian, but like Durga is for me the epitome of, female empowerment and strength and love all at the same time. And I was just like, let me be the both of you in this room. And sometimes just calling on your forces really, really helps you. I give you a great example. When I had to go and do the embryo implantation.
Yeah.
Because the COVID bit, I was all on my own. My brother couldn't make it. My friend couldn't make it. And then I remember getting out of the tube to get to the fertility clinic and feeling so alone. I'm like, this could be the most important day. And they say you need to be really relaxed. You need to be really happy so the embryo will attach to your uterus. And I remember feeling so low. And then remember telling myself, I closed my eyes and I like literally said, dear God, just send me, be here for me. And I can't even tell you what I felt. Like I literally felt a wind. And it was as if 1,000 angels were standing behind me. And I immediately like perked up with that light. And I knew, I was like, I've got a battalion behind me. Like I don't have to bat an eyelid. This is happening today. Let's go. So sometimes you just need to like believe that you can call on whoever you want to, right? It doesn't have to be a God. It can be someone who gives you strength. Like if I really get inspired by you, I can say, I want to channel my inner Kirti today, and it will channel your strength.
I better be on high pardon, All right. And the third one?
The third one would be to just drown out the noise.
Just drown out the noise. Oh, that's like drop your noise.
Yes.
I'll go with that one.
So just think of it as static, right? Like forget what you hear in your head, what you hear from outside as you take those first steps, because it will be the weight of everyone's expectations. It'll be the weight of your expectations. You need to find that inner silence, or your inner whatever mojo song, whether it's like I have my own mojo song, which I always listen to, but like, what's that song that, Sylvester Stallone was training to? The one was just dun, 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 dun.
Oh, yeah. The song.
Yeah, but like literally think of that song so that you hear nothing else and just move forward. Because if you give in to the noise, you will falter. But when you drown out the noise and drop your noise, you will just keep moving forward, because you're putting that one foot in front of the other and you're channeling all of your strengths and your angels. You will move forward.
All right, my last question. What would you like your mom to know today?
She already knows. She already knows, but if I pretended to be someone who didn't know that she was here with me at this very moment, I think I would say that, thank you. It must have been really, really hard as a mother to come in knowing that you have to leave. But if she hadn't, I wouldn't be here today. So I'd say thank you for making that choice for me. I'm sorry to end the last question on a teary note, but yeah, it's.
I think that's one of the most beautiful messages.
Yeah, I wouldn't change a thing.
I think I'm going to dedicate this one to your mom.
That'd be amazing. Thank you.
We're going to do that one. Thank you, Pavi. You really touched my heart today as well. And I really, really do hope it touches many, many out there who are sitting in that space and going to leap or not to leap.
Thank you. Just jump. I'll be there. Channel your inner Pavi. I'll be there to catch you.
That's it. Thank you, Pavi.
Thank you so much for having me today. It was lovely.
And there you go. Were you inspired as much as I was? Did it make you think about your own life and also look at your own courageous moments in life? Because I do believe each of us have lived a courageous life one way or the other. We've had to make decisions we didn't expect. But are you sitting like me in that moment where it's again the time to leap or not to leap? And I hope this week's episode inspired you just to do that. Now, if you haven't yet, please subscribe, please follow. It does help so much. And do share it out with anybody who could really benefit from this conversation. There's nothing like spreading motivation and courage to others. Because all it will take maybe is just that one story that makes all the difference to drop the noise and live the life we want. Just like it made a difference in mine. Have a good one. Until the next one.